Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Johann Fuss Library, and we're so thankful to see each one of you here today, and it is Valentine's Day. Happy Valentine's Day. After this is over, we've got some nice chocolate kisses out here we'll be passing around. I still see some people coming in, but we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm Betsy Fugate Joyner, for those of you who don't know me. I'm a third-generation Boca Grande native who I'm very proud to be. And we have another native speaking with us today, Carolyn Parkinson Nabers. I'm not going to intrude on her introduction too much, but I just want to do a few of my little commercials that we have to do for history program. Our history program this season is dedicated to Captain Robert Johnson. Those of you that know, he passed away in August of this past year, and he had been our historian at the History Center for over 30 years, plus his family has been here since 1888. They were the harbor pilots here in this community in Charlotte Harbor, and then extended to Key West when the port closed down. His great-grandfather, grandfather, father, uncles, and cousin, as well as Robert, all harbor pilots. Captain Johnny Johnson, his cousin, still lives on the island, and he was the last one to retire in 2012. Johnny's out of town right now, so couldn't be here, but we're hoping that he will be here before the end of our program, so maybe he'll share a few little stories. It wasn't just Robert who was a historian from his family. Kingsmore, his grandfather, did many things and was very prominent in the community. His uncle Clem was responsible for the Boca Grande Journal. This was a newspaper that was printed in 1949. I don't think any of these books are available, but we do have it at the History Center. They also have it at the library. But these are newspaper articles that Clem published the year of 1949. Sadly, the newspaper collapsed after that time. But this has got a lot of fun stories to view and to see. And one of the things I love is seeing the ads. The ads are all fun. And to see what this community was like at that time. We had so many businesses in town. And one of the reasons we chose her story as a theme is because most of the businesses were operated by the women. Yes, the men were all working, but the women had owned and ran a lot of the businesses for many years on the island. We talked about doing her story, our group of our education committee. I believe we started talking about it about 5 years ago. And we sat down in 2 meetings, and I don't even know how many pages of ladies' names that we wrote down. There's so many of how many women have been so influential on this island since the beginning. We started in the 1900s, and we went up to present day. And as we all say, women, who's behind all the strong men? It's the women. So there's so many to do. We were not able to do the her story that we had planned, which was going to be a short little vignette on maybe 25 different women, which would have probably been just a few sentences. So it was going to be a great program, but COVID hit us first, and then the hurricane. So we've decided to bring out some of these stories throughout the year, and hopefully maybe next year we'll do a few more. And so thankful that we're going to be able to feature Mary Parkinson this time with her daughter Carolyn. So just a few little things about her story. This book, I'll put it aside. People can look through it, but the library does have a copy, and so does the History Center, and I'm pretty sure that Rosemary has it all archived also. If you haven't had a chance to see the Ian documentary that we produced with Rick Montgomery and many sponsors, this is an excellent documentary done, just a portion of the story of Ian, because the story of Ian still goes on. So many people are still not in their homes or only halfway in their homes, and it's certainly, we did not get hit like Fort Myers and Sanibel and Captiva, but we were definitely hit in this area as far as Sarasota. So this is available on Island TV, And we have these flyers. You can look it up. Tuesday, February the 20th, let's talk about Florida. There's information on this. This is our book group. It's done by Zoom. If you want to sign up for it, you can still sign up for this event. And another article about the Johnson family is in this December edition of Gasparilla magazine. It's very interesting. It talks a lot about the history of the Harbor Pilots. So I just want to thank you all for coming. We need to mention our sponsors. Kimberly Bleach from Bank of America First Bank was not able to be here. She had an accident when she was traveling and is 3 weeks now out of her surgery and still in a cast and can't put weight on her leg. She sends her best. Just yesterday she contacted us and said she misses everyone and she's really hoping to be here before the end of our time. Scott and Jill Shively of the Shively Charitable Foundation also helped sponsor this event. Gives us the opportunity to have the Lee County Sheriff's Department, that's mandatory to have, to be able to have this beautiful space and take care of having this presentation and having these programs all videoed. So thanks to those sponsors and thank you everyone for your donations. We have a few other people to thank, the Johann Fuss Foundation for allowing us to be here each year in February. Julianne Greenberg and Bobby, we're so thankful for their support. Julianne planning and helping set up and being there in case we have any malfunctions in our video or our audio service. I think that's about it. I'm going to turn it over to Carolyn Parkinson Nabers. I've got a few things I want to share about her, but I'm going to wait till she gives her talk because I don't want to intrude on anything, but I have some great memories that I'd love to share. She is a Boca Grande girl, and she's got a great story to share.
Thank you, Betsy. Okay, try it again. Thank you, Betsy. Can you hear me? I would like to add, I'm a Florida cracker, an island native, and the daughter of a Charlotte Harbor fisherman.
Can you give me a microphone, please?
I'm not a public speaker. I've never used a microphone, so keep after me. And I guarantee I'll walk away from it. Got it? That better? Yes. My husband Clyde's here today to support me. Clyde lived in the fishing village of Gasparilla until he was 6 years old, when the fishermen and the fishery moved to Placida to enable them to ship fish out by rail as well as trucking. The day we were married, October the 18th, 1961, 63 years ago, Clyde moved back to the island. He worked many jobs: Griffin Builders, Gasparilla Golf Course, Knight Brothers Boat Yard, and he was a boatman for the Boca Grande Pilots for a while. 1963, we purchased the service station at the corner of 4th and Park. We owned and operated the Nabers Chevron service station and garage from 1963 to 1999. After selling the gas station, Cotton remembers the gas station. After selling the gas station, he went to work for the Lee County Mosquito Control. And his job was working the Boca Grande and surrounding islands as the aerial inspector. Clyde loved the helicopter work. Thinking he'd only be there a few years, 21 years later, he retired. I wish my brother Sam could have been here today. Sam grew up on the island and graduated from Charlotte High School. He served his time in Vietnam, and out of the Army, he worked for the telephone company until he retired. My sister-in-law, Dee, did not grow up on the island. She is from Kansas. And she's a nurse at one of our local hospitals. My son Mike is here today. Mike grew up on the island, swimming and fishing, and in summer as a young kid, he learned to throw his cast net walking up and down the seawall, throwing it in people's swimming pools. Mike graduated from Charlotte High School. He played sports, baseball and football, and he rode bulls and bareback broncs. In high school, college, and pro, Mike went to sea as a merchant seaman. After 40 years, Master Mariner, Captain Mike Nabers, decided that was long enough to be away from home. He came ashore, and he's now selling real estate. His wife, who couldn't be here today because she has an acupuncture office in Northport. And her son, Kyle, is in the United States Navy. And our youngest grandson, Jake, is 11 years old, not too much interested in sports, but he likes sailing, plays the guitar, and is taking piano lessons. Our daughter, Misty Nabers Nichols. Misty grew up on the island. She graduated from Lemon Bay High School. Growing up here, she loved playing with the dolphins. And that was her desire for her work, is she was going to play with dolphins. Well, guess what? She did. Down in the Florida Keys for several years before she returned to school. After graduating from the University of West Florida with degrees in business and biology, she worked offshore on oil rigs for NOAA. She was manager of the Aquatic Preserve Manager in Apalachicola for the state of Florida before she accepted the job as executive director of the GICIA here on the island. And that was 26 years ago this month. Misty has 3 horses, 2 dogs, and 2 barn cats, all spoiled, and a room full of trophies and ribbons she's won from showing her horses. I'd say her hobbies are probably traveling, photography, and my son-in-law couldn't be here today, Misty's husband, Lieutenant Colonel Roger Nichols. Roger just retired from the military after 47 years of service, and he's now volunteering at a vet help center. He just can't get away from it. And if anybody here is a vet and needs any help, go see Roger. My grandson, Robbie, grew up here on the island, graduated from Lemon Bay High School, and attended Eckerd College. Robbie majored in baseball, pitched 4 years at Eckerd for the Tritons. Now he's following in his dad's footsteps. He is now second mate on a tug in Valdez. Did I say that, Robbie? I always say Valdez, and Robbie tells me it's Valdez, Alaska. And he married Carly just a year ago, married 1 year. I was wondering how many people lived on the island before 1999 when we were still in the gas station. Oh, a lot of you. We have lots of friends here today. And I'm going to skip that because he's not here today. Pat Eagles called me. Betsy said 5 years ago. I said 3 or 4, and it's probably 5 years ago, and asked me if she could interview me for a history on my mom, Mary Ellen Parkinson. Then along came COVID, and then Hurricane Ian, and we thought that was just all in history. But before the end of last year, they called me and asked me if I would read the interview at the History Bytes. Well, I wasn't sure. I'm not a public speaker. My voice is terrible. And with a big push from Betsy, it's hard to say no to Betsy. I agreed to do it. Getting into the interview, I thought I was pretty well briefed on it. Betsy says, "Oh, no, incorporate your dad." Well, there goes Pat's interview. Pat called me to say she was sorry she could not be here today because she's having Valentine's Day knee surgery today. Boca Grande has many interesting books reflecting the history of Boca Grande. I must admit, Bob Edick's book, Fisher Folks in Charlotte Harbor, is my favorite.
Amen.
Why? Because Bob dedicated that book to my dad. This is a dedication. Thomas S. Parkinson, a man in command of knowledge of years lived and with the humanity for which we can all learn. Bob was here last week, but he had let me know that he couldn't be here today because he has some health issues and that took priority. Her story, Mary Ellen Parkinson, that was the interview title, has become Mary Ellen Parkinson and her family. So here we go. Mary Ellen Vickers Parkinson was born March the 5th, 1918, in Charlotte Harbor, Florida. She died November the 1st, 2004, in Englewood, Florida. And she's buried in the Charlotte Harbor Cemetery. Thomas Samuel Parkinson, Tom or Tommy, was born May the 24th, 1914, in Charlotte Harbor, Florida. Died January the 4th, 1994, in Venice, Florida. And Tommy's buried in the Charlotte Harbor Cemetery. The Charlotte Harbor Cemetery is the oldest known marked cemetery in Charlotte County. Mary's parents, Wesley Call Vickers, he was born April the 27th, 1888, in the Florida Panhandle. And Nellie Faulkner was born March the 20th, 1894, in Medulla, Florida. Medulla is in Polk County, and it's just south of Lakeland. Grandma Vickers lived on Kiocosta with her father, Kelly Faulkner, and her brother. And where they lived on Kiocosta is still called Faulkner's Mound. Mary had 4 brothers and 2 sisters. Mary's father, Wesley, wore many hats. He was a farmer, and in 1907, he worked building the train trestle to Boca Grande. He was a storekeeper and a school bus driver. And in 1926, Wesley ran for the Charlotte County Commission. He won, but he was disqualified because he neglected to pay his $3 campaign fee. So in 1928, he ran again, and he was a Charlotte County Commissioner for 18 years. Wesley bought, I think it was 1950, Wesley bought 40 acres in Charlotte Harbor for $400. He built the home where Mary grew up. In 1928, the Tamiami Trail was completed, and it ran right by their front door. And the Tamiami Trail now is known as Highway 41. Mom was born and raised in Charlotte Harbor, attended Charlotte Harbor Elementary School, graduated from Charlotte High School in Punta Gorda in 1936. Her first job out of high school was at the Charlotte County Courthouse. One of her first duties was to register people to vote. Voting was always very important to Mom. She married my dad, Tommy Parkinson, March the 29th, 1939, in Charlotte Harbor. Dad grew up in Charlotte Harbor, commercial fishing and guiding. Dad was already living in Boca Grande, had a room at the guide house, which there's a picture of it here someplace. It's where the fishermen tied their boats, and they had a few rooms there where Dad was living. Dad loved baseball. Boca Grande had a sandlot team, and they played surrounding teams in surrounding areas. One of the local guides, Dwayne Futch, told me Tommy was always the first one to show up on Saturdays to play. One Saturday he came by and he yelled out, "Can't play today, guys. I'm going to Charlotte Harbor to get married." By the time they married, Dad was manager of the Boca Grande fishery, a branch of the Gasparilla fishery. The Gasparilla fishery was located at the north end of the island, and that's another day, another story. Boca Grande fishery was located on East Dock. East Dock was at the end of 4th Street. Back then, there was a bridge over the bayou to the Gasparilla Golf Course. There's a picture of the bridge here somewhere, too. Living quarters on the dock. Mom moved to Boca Grande the day they were married. I was born in 1940 in Charlotte Harbor. The doctor who delivered me, Dr. Clement, delivered my husband Clyde, my younger brother Sam, and both our children, Mike and Misty, and Clyde's sister. They weren't all born in Charlotte Harbor. Mom's first job was her family. She stayed busy. Never a paid employee of the fishery, she helped Daddy. She answered the phone, took the fish orders, wrapped the fish after Daddy had cleaned, and often delivered on her bike. The retail market. Did I skip a page? The retail market in town. I did skip a page. The retail market in town was not Daddy's only responsibility. He had the dock on the bayou. Fishermen came in all hours of the day and night, depending on what kind of fishing, and he tried to be there. Mom had the well-deserved reputation of a great cook. She collected cookbooks, enjoyed reading them, and trying many of the recipes. She was always ready to bake cakes, pies, or cookies for the school, church, or community bake sales. Dad embarrassed her many times. It did not matter who was downstairs with him in the market. When lunch was ready, he'd say, "Come on up, meet." Usually they would decline, but not always. Mary taught Sunday school at the Boca Grande Methodist Church, and she served on the Community House Board, which consisted of mopping floors, washing windows, and opening and chaperoning on Friday and Saturday nights so the island kids had a place to go. I remember as a young teenager in summer when we'd have those all-day rainstorms, we'd have my friends in for taffy pulls or popcorn balls. She also always had some handwork going, crochet, embroidery, or needlepoint. Mom loved to read. She read every newspaper that came to the island and worked crossword puzzles. On Fridays, she returned the borrowed books to the library, visited with her friend and librarian Pansy Cost, maybe discussing where Pansy, Tom, Mary, and Tommy were going to dinner Saturday night on their weekly outing, leaving with an armload of books to be returned the next Friday. The fishery owned the lot between now McLaughlin's and the Temptation. There she had a garden. She raised a few vegetables and lots of flowers. She didn't appreciate Dad's help with her garden much. She said he watered too hard and dug up her plants. Mom grew up as Mary Ellen at home. Not long after coming to Boca Grande, she was just Mary. Mary was a shopper, too, even at the grocery store. She went to Harry's grocery most every day and shopping and visiting with the owners, Harry and Marie Whidden. When I was a teenager driving, we'd go to the nearest mall, which was the Edison Mall in Fort Myers. Arriving, make our plans for the day, meet back for lunch. The amazing thing about Mom, she loved shopping, but she seldom ever bought anything for herself. She was always thinking of others. Shopping reminds me of a story. When Mike was about 5 years old, he loved riding these horses out in front of the stores. And I don't remember what it cost, maybe a quarter. Mom put her quarter in. She put Mike on the horse, put her quarter in, and it didn't work. So she pushed the coin return, and out came a handful of change. She reached over, picked up a quarter, and walked away. And I said, "Mom, there's more change." She looked at me and said, "It's not mine." Back then in Boca Grande, we had two Mary Belascas, Mary Brad Belasca and Mary Ted Belasca. Mom and Mary Ted Belasca were very close friends. Mary's house was where I was first introduced to coquina broth. They had a special wire basket on a pole to dig the coquinas. Mary and Mary spent many hours on the beach looking for shells. They both had amazing shell collections. I have Mom, and Misty's already got her word in for it. Before Daddy left the fishery, They built their home on Gasparilla Street. Mom's friend and neighbor, Sis Smith, widow of Ted Smith, former golf pro at the Gasparilla Inn, would meet in town most every morning, pick up the mail, and sit on the bench on the west side of the Boca Grande Realty, waiting for the loose caboose to open. They became island famous, sitting there with their stylish pocketbooks, greeting the folks as they passed. Mom usually having iced tea to keep Sis company while Sis had lunch, then go home and prepare lunch for Tommy, now retired. Never a day did she not have time for her grandkids. By now, 5 grands, Mike, Misty, Kimberly, Samantha, and Stephen. And everything was always better at Grandma's house. And then I always remember a quote from Gene Bow, friend, Texan, Islander, courtesy of the United States Coast Guard. Gene was stationed here during the war, and he married a local girl, Louise Spear, granddaughter of Captain Sprott, who owned the ferry. Gene's quote, never heard Mary say a bad word about anyone. That's my mom, true Southern lady. And I think I left out one page.
Carolyn, don't forget, we're going to ask questions. I think that was excellent, and there's no way you could have done that in a 5 or 10 minute vignette. Great job, thank you, and thank you for adding all the family into it. I just have a couple memories, and I'm not going to embarrass her because I think it's a compliment. Carolyn looks the same as she has for many, many years, but she was always one of my idols. I was the little girl that was, my mom was a teacher at Boca Grande School, and I was always at every event that they had. Well, I aspired to be a basketball player like Carolyn, Kay Burgess, Becky Thompson. They had the greatest uniforms. They were black satin top with shorts with red stripes, and of course we were called the Tarpons. And Carolyn played on the basketball team as long as I can remember. We traveled. I was able to travel with them when they went, can you imagine, from Boca Grande, the basketball teams went to Everglades, went to Fort Myers, and played all over. Another thing I have about Carolyn is we also worked, also she was a cheerleader, and that was another thing I wanted to get to do. And they had these great skirts too. They kind of looked like the poodle skirt, but they had fish on them, tarpon on them. And I was always, we had outdoor bleachers, and basketball court was there where the yard is there at the community center now. But it was great. She's a great athlete, and I was fortunate enough to grow up with that group as the little mascot who probably was a pest a lot of the time. But it was a great experience. Later years, Carolyn and I have a son who's about the same age as Misty, so we were involved in a lot of things as the kids were growing up. We also worked together at Fugate's. Carolyn worked in the patio shop for my Aunt Geraldine, and I was managing Fugate's at that time, and we had lots of great fun then. But I think the most memorable experience was, of many, was we took a road trip. I got a job in Maine in the summer of 1988. Never been that far away to go anywhere. Got a job in Maine working at a hotel, asked Carolyn to go with me. Neither one of us had ever been to Maine, and I hadn't been past North Carolina, I don't think, maybe once with my parents, but never driving anywhere. Well, so we set out in my little white car. We went to Maine. We had the most fun. We stopped all along the way in Charleston. But the best thing is, Carolyn does not drink. But under my influence, we would have a margarita when we got stopped that night. And my mom was also a baker, and she made great chocolate chip cookies. So she supplied us with chocolate chip cookies. So if you haven't tried a chocolate chip cookie with the margarita, you better try it. That was such a great trip. We got to, I was working outside of Portland, Maine at Prout's Neck, and Carolyn came there with me. She stayed at a hotel, I think one night, got her on a plane, and she came back home. But I wish we, could recreate that at one point. We'd probably need to get a driver, Maybe we take Misty. But those are just some great fun memories that I have shared with Carolyn. And through the years, I'm so happy to call her a friend.
One of my ambitions, I love chocolate, chocoholic. And I wanted to go to Hershey and stand on the corner of Hershey and Cocoa. We did that too.
We just kind of looked at the map and said, well, you want to try to go here? And we had it was a great, great trip. I have some great memories about Mary also. As I grew up and I married a fisherman, so fishing was always in my blood anyhow, but it was a different type of fishing with the commercial fishing. And Tommy and Mary were always there for the fishermen. Tommy worked for Walter Galt, and there was through your paycheck and things, you always had an account, whether it was for nets or corks or leads or whatever. Tommy was the best. He was always so giving and so friendly, and the guys would come in with 500 pounds, 2,000 pounds, whatever time of day or night, Tommy would be there, or he'd tell them where to, if they knew how to get in to put the fish in the ice, and he'd meet them there in the morning to weigh everything out and double check it. But Mary was there. I can see her wrapping the fish in the newspaper, and everybody getting fresh fish was the best thing on this island. Tommy coming in the back door, the Pink Elephant, bringing in the fish of the day. We didn't have a lot of printed menus. It was verbal, and we certainly didn't have digital computers now. And Tommy would come, and I, growing up working in the Pink Elephant, Tommy'd come in that back door, and, my dad had told him to bring whatever he got. So he'd have clean, fresh pompano. It might be snapper. It might be grouper. And it was definitely mullet. The mullet was definitely on the menu in those days. But great memories and just great times. Thank you so much, Carolyn, for this great, great program. And I don't know, anybody want to say anything?
Yeah, I do. My name's David Futch. Hey, Carolyn, I had to come down. I live up in Tampa now, but my family, my great-grandfather, Frank Futch, came here in 1882. And I got to tell you, the Futches have always had great reverence for Tommy Parkinson, because something you didn't mention, Carolyn, I thought you might, that a long time ago, before the canals were built across from Whiddens and across from Miller's, that's where the black community was. And so many of those people had nothing. And Tommy Parkinson, when he knew somebody was in trouble, he would put some fish in a paper bag or wrap it up and maybe put a can of beans and put it on their front steps. Never said a word about this. That's how kind Tommy Parkinson was. Now, the other thing I wanted to say, oh, by the way, this is Frank. He's named after his great-great-great-grandfather. Anyway, I wanted you to tell us a couple of things. Well, one of the things, I want you to tell us about some of the more interesting characters that were on the island, like maybe mention something about Sam Whiddon or Billy Wheeler or Doris Wheeler. And also, Betsy's father, D.O. I mean, without D.O. Fugate, this island would not have had much to drink for many years. So please, if you could say something about some of the other characters that you knew.
Yeah, well, David, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
This was supposed to be about my mom. And then I kind of got sidetracked. And there's so many stories growing up here for all these years. Some of them I can't tell. But there are so many stories until I got to the point where, that's another story for another day. And I appreciate your comments. Who would you like to know about?
Tell them about Sam Whiddon.
I've got a picture here. I asked Kim the other day at the Historical Society, I said, Kim, do you have a picture of Sam Whiddon's boatways? And she looked at me and she said, Sam Whiddon's boatways? No, we don't have any picture of that. And so we went to the computer. Where's the picture of, here it is. we went to the computer, and she started going through, and she said, I didn't know there was a boat waves. And she started going down. She came to this picture of Miller's. I said, no, hold it right there. There's the boat waves. Way over here on the corner was Sam Wooden's boat waves, which was just north of the fish dock. And Clyde was telling me a little story about that. Sam was there, and then a few years later, along came Miller's Marina. And Clyde said, see that big boat right there? He said, do you remember that boat? I said, yeah, that was the old Gulmall from Panama City. He said, well, it tied on that side of the dock, and it blocked the rails where the boats had to come down. And said Sam would have his boat, have a boat. Well, all the fishermen that had copper painted up their boats would have to be pulled there at Sam's Boatways. Well, Clyde was telling me the story that whenever he got ready to turn a boat loose and that big boat was there, he'd have to go over to the marina and get Mac to go out to have the captain move the boat. And that didn't please either one of them.
I want to say one thing about Sam Wooden. Now, when I was a kid and they were teaching us how to become guides here, your initiation fee was that you had to copper bottom paint every guide boat, every one of them. So every day there'd be a new guide boat there. And of course, you know, and then there was Peanuts, who used to live on a houseboat down at Wooden's, and he would come down and help us. And Peanuts, he was pretty much the island drunk for a long time. And so he would, the first thing he would do when we would get there, he would open up the copper bottom paint, stick his hand down in it, and he'd rub it all over himself, and he goes, I'm going to get it on me anyway.
Dave,
Now, the other thing is that,
David,
yes,
you
ma'am.
just stole Clyde's story.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Well, how about if you how about getting Clyde to tell him about if you showed up late with your boat, because you had to be there at first light.
Well, I don't know if I could get Clyde to stand up and do that or not, but I'll tell you. Sam would tell you what time he was going to turn the boat loose. And if he told you first light, you better be there at first light. If he told you you're taking a little longer to get it copper painted, if he told you 2 o'clock and you got there at 3 minutes after 2, your boat was floating out in the bayou. I'll tell a little personal story. Sam had quite a reputation, and none of his family's here today. I wish they were. The great-granddaughter, Melissa, who is down at the marina now, she and her brother and her sisters have the marina. Melissa's my goddaughter. Her mother and I were teaching Sunday school together when Melissa was born. And so I know many stories from the marina. When I was, I guess, 4 or 5 years old during the war, I heard everybody talking about Uncle Sam. And that was the only Sam I knew, so I called him Uncle Sam. And he and Dad were very good friends. And Sam would usually get to the dock before 5 o'clock every morning, because Daddy was always at the fish dock at 5 o'clock. And so I kind of grew up knowing Sam. And after I was grown and he was still around, any fruit he had, if the grapefruit tree was blooming or the oranges or the guavas or whatever, he'd always send me some fruit. And I know by now anybody who's ever heard stories of Sam would know he's a little stubborn, a little hard-headed. And so his daughter brought me some fruit. She said, Daddy said to bring you these guavas. So I thought, well, I'll write him a thank you note. So I wrote Sam a thank you note. And I hadn't seen him for years. And I went by late one afternoon, and he was standing out in the yard, and he was standing there with his paper hat and his arms crossed. And so I thought, well, I'll just stop and say hello. So he had another gentleman there with him. So I got out of the car, and I walked over, and I said, Captain Sam, I'm Tommy Parkinson's daughter. He said, I know who you are. Okay. I said, I just wanted to thank you for the fruit that you sent me. He said, you already did. Peanuts. That was another question. That was Clyde's story, David.
I'm sorry about
Bring up another one.
Let's see. Well, we had gone down. Sam had told Dad to bring the Lacey down to the ways, and what it was just it was a winch, and they had railroad ties that went down into the water, and you pulled your boat up, and they chocked it up, and then it had an electric motor, and it would pull it out, right? So he would tell you, "I'll see you there at first light." And that's how he talked. He goes, "I will see you there at first light, Captain." And then he would turn around and walk away slowly back to the marina. Well, we got down there and the sun wasn't even up yet, but, you know, first light had been about 20 minutes. And we saw him walking back. We had the boat ready to go. We saw him walking back to the marina, and he said, my dad jumped off the boat and ran down the road, and he said, "Cap, we're here to pull it out." And he goes, "I told you first light. If you'll bring it here tomorrow at first light, I will pull it out. But you weren't here at first light, Captain." And the other thing we did, we once had to put a shaft in the Lacey, and as a matter of fact, that's one of the more famous fishing guide boats that ever existed on this island. It was built by Francis Knight. Billy Wheeler ran it, my brother Mark Futch ran it, I ran it, my dad ran it, Duncan Wheeler ran it. It was the best guide boat that was ever built. Anyway, we had to put a shaft in it, so Dad knew that Sam Whidden had some shafts down in like you walk into the marina and off to the right is like a room. And he had all these, all kinds of marine gear up in the ceiling across the rafters. And so we went back there and we saw a Monel shaft. If anybody knows what Monel is, it's a steel and nickel mix. It does not rust. And it's what we used to tack the boats together with. But anyway, Monel shaft, it had a $119 sticker on it. At that time, you probably would have had to pay $1,000 for that shaft. And my dad went back out and said, "Sam, I need that shaft, but it's only $119. That thing's worth a heck of a lot more than that, Cap." And he goes, "If you want the damn thing, buy it. If you don't want it, don't buy it." And he sold it to him for $119.
Anybody else got a question about anything?
I'm sorry to take up time.
I do not have a photo here of my gas station. Barbara, like I said, this was going to be about my mom. This is another day, another story. Come back when they let me get up here again.
Bill Hinman was always a favorite, right? You knew him really well. I know he entertained a lot of people around. Got any stories of Bill?
Listen, there's too many stories of Bill, and that's another day, another time. And yes, I knew Bill very well because Clyde was generous. And well, I'll back up a little bit. As the story goes, my daughter just wrote this in something she wrote for her dad. When Bill Hinman first moved to Boca Grande as the deputy sheriff, Clyde invited him home for dinner. And as Misty says, Dad invited him home for dinner and he never left. And then later years, he even worked with us at the gas station. And unfortunately, Bill has passed over. He's not with us any longer.
Do you have a question, sir?
I wanted to know about the copper paint. I don't understand the copper paint
On the bottoms of the boat, well, you have to get one of these guys to tell you that. That was a little out of my line.
It was a metal paint. It was literally copper mixed with a red dye, if you will, and what they used it for, worms couldn't get through it. It was sort of keep the worms out of the keels and everything else on the bottom. So.
Are there any other questions?
Why did the gas station fail?
Oh, the gas station didn't fail. Clyde just got tired of doing it. I'd like to say something about Betsy's mom. Betsy's mother was my English teacher in high school here on the island. And I think of her so many times. I can remember vaguely when one of the kids would say, "Where are you at?" And Mrs. Fugate would look at him and say, "Where are you?" And I think of that so often now. If I hear that, I think of Margaret. And this morning when I was getting ready to come, I was thinking of Mrs. Fugate, because one of the things she'd say to us when we get up to do our book reports or anything in front of the class, she'd say, "Look at your audience." So she was very special. And Betsy was talking about the baseball teams, the basketball teams, whatever in Boca Grande. Boca Grande had a championship basketball team, boys basketball team. And Mrs. Fugate would take us girls to the team. Well, she drove a station wagon. No seatbelt laws in those days. There would be as many girls as we could get in the station wagon, along with all our crinolines that we wore back in the 50s.
Those were the best days. Thank you so much, Carolyn. And I think I heard her say she'd come back. She's in Mount Glen now. I can pass this to her any day. This has been a great program. I will say that I think of my mother often, and I did think this morning she would be so proud of her graduate from Boca Grande High School. I saw someone say, "Was there a high school?" Yes, there was a high school here. There was the community center was our school, and it was first grade through the 12th grade. My mother came to teach here after she graduated from Florida State, which was a ladies' college at that time. She wanted to teach on an island, and her first choice with her girlfriend was Puerto Rico. And she wasn't able to go there because her grandfather was ill, and she was the oldest child and was the only one that could drive. So she had to wait. So she and her girlfriend picked the next island, that was Boca Grande. God-forsaken island. My grandmother Gami said, "Why are you going to that God-forsaken island?" And she was even more upset, 40 years later when my mom never left. My mom was fortunate to be here until 2013, lived on the island forever, all her life, and she loved teaching. She loved being a teacher at that school, and she taught at the school until it closed. The last graduating class was 1963, and then the elementary school was here for one more year. But she moved to Lemon Bay at that time, which was a elementary junior high school, and then she later moved into the audiovisual, became a teacher, and she traveled over 5 counties as an audiovisual instructor, who nobody even does that anymore. But she did that, and then she ended up her teaching career before she retired in Neil Armstrong School in Port Charlotte as a librarian. So she loved teaching, and she loved all of her students, and we still hear from them. Carolyn keeps in touch with lots of her friends, and that's one good thing that Facebook has come around, is a lot of people, and we have a website that shares a lot of pictures, and there's some great memories about the Boca Grande School. So thank you all for coming. Next week we have another her story. Porter Joyner will be speaking, telling a story about Grandma Effie Joyner, who grew up and raised her 7 children plus many more in Gasparilla, the village of Gasparilla, which is the north end of the island. We do have the book, The One Island, Three Towns, for sale at the History Center. It gives a lot of information. It's a lot of photographs that we discussed last week. So be sure to look at that. Stop at the History Center anytime during the week. There's so much history there. I didn't point out our board members that are here today, but Tricia Lowe is here, Karen Grace is here, David Futch is here. He's around. Jim and Rosemary, and of course Kim, our executive director. Sandy Melvin's here. So we have a great team working through the History Center, and Rosemary and Jim and Kim, we can't say enough about them, about their knowledge. So if you have a question or you have any other, want to stop and visit or have friends in town, please stop and visit. So next week, same time, same place. David?
I just wanted to say, Bob Edick's book is on sale at the Historical Society, isn't it? Don't you have some copies?
not.
anymore, but I heard there's a few for sale at the Lighthouse gift shop. They don't have very many left, but they did have a few. We don't have any more.
And we have, David also has a book that he's printed. We've got copies. They're all around town. David can talk to you about that in a little bit. If you want to come up here, you know, it's a little bit, please come and look at these photos because they're priceless. Yes.
What is the status of Bob Edick's health?
Bobby is doing well. He was here last week and spoke last week. Thank you for asking, and he'll probably be here next week if he doesn't have a doctor's appointment. He's doing very well.
We ran into Linda a few weeks ago and startled us by telling us about his cancer.
Right. He's doing very well. Thank you for asking. Thank you all for coming. Please come and look at the pictures and talk to Carolyn, and thank you again.